Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Kitab as-Salah. As-Salah in the language means dua, supplication. This is as Allah Azza wa Jal says, Inna salataka sakanun lahum. He tells the Prophet, truly your supplication is a means of tranquility for them. In the technical terminology, it is the well-known movements and utterances in worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which we will discuss a little later. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, the chapter of Al-Adhan and Iqamah. The Adhan in the language means to announce something or to proclaim something. This is as Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا وَعَلَى كُلِّ ضَامِرٍ يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ عَمِيقٍ. And announce or proclaim to mankind the Hajj, they will come to you on foot and on every lean camel and from every wide mountain pathway. In the Sharia technical terminology, it means to announce the time of prayer using the well-known words. The ruling on adhan is that it is fard kifaya, meaning there needs to be somebody from the community doing it, from the men. If nobody does it, then everyone is taken to account and they are sinful. The evidence for this is the hadith where he said to his companions, إِذَا حَضَرَتْ الصَّلَاةِ فَلْيُؤَذِّن لَكُمْ أَحَدُكُمْ وَلْيَؤُمَّكُمْ أَكْبَرُكُمْ. When the prayer time comes, then let one of you give the adhan and let the eldest of you lead the prayer. The adhan has many virtues. Let us mention a couple. As in the hadith in Bukhari, لا يسمع مدى صوت المؤذن جن ولا إنس إلا شهد له يوم القيامة, that neither a jinn nor an insan, a human, will hear the voice of a mu'adhin except that he will testify for him on Yawm al-Qiyamah. Likewise he, alayhi salatu wasalam, said, Al-mu'adhinuna atwalun nas a'naqan Yawm al-Qiyamah, that the mu'adhinun, those who used to proclaim the adhan, will be the ones with the longest neck on Yawm al-Qiyamah. The wordings for the adhan is just as you hear it in the masajids nowadays, except there is also another narration in which saying Allahu Akbar, instead of saying it 4 times at the beginning, you say it twice. This is also a narration. There is also something else about the adhan which unfortunately you don't find much, but it is a sunnah. It's a sunnah which the Prophet ﷺ taught one of his mu'adhin, Abu Mahdhura, which is called At-Tarji'. What is At-Tarji'? When the mu'adhin calls out Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Now at this point, he doesn't continue on with the adhan, but rather he almost whispers to himself, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah, Ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. When he's done that, he carries on with the adhan as normal. So he has repeated the 2 shahadas to himself before actually calling them out. There are 2 fundamental rules in this chapter. Fundamental rule number 1, these are the conditions for the adhan to be correct. 9 of them, so make a note. Firstly, that the mu'adhin needs to be a Muslim. Number 2, he needs to be a male. Number 3, he needs to be aqil, which means have aql, intellect. Number 4, that he needs to be at the age of distinction, tamyiz. Number 5, he needs to be somebody who can actually speak and utter out words. Number 6, that the adhan needs to be after the timing of the prayer has entered. Number 7, that it needs to be all of it from one person. Number 8, at-tartib, meaning the correct order needs to be respected. And number 9, al-mu'alat, it needs to be done all consecutively without any big gaps in between. Let's go through this. Number 1, he needs to be a Muslim. This is because adhan is an act of ibadah, and it has preceded that ibadah cannot be accepted from kuffar. Number 2, he has to be a male, because there's no evidence that a female is allowed to give adhan, except if they are in a place, all female place, and there's no chance of any male listening, then there's no problem that one of them will give adhan. Number 3, he has to have aql, meaning he's not allowed to be mad. And the evidence already has preceded that the pen is lifted from three types of people, and one of them is the madman until he gains some sort of intellect and sense. Point number 4, the age of at-tamyiz, which is 7 years old, as we have mentioned before. And at-tamyiz means that he can distinguish an act of worship from just any other act. Point number 5, that he has to be natiq, which is a person who can speak. Not just speak, but also utter the letters and words correctly, so that he does not change the meaning of the words. For example, instead of saying hayya as-salah, he does not say hayya as-salah, because salah means prayer and salah means a hall, like a ballroom hall. Hayya al-falah means come to success, and hayya al-falah means come to the desert. Allahu Akbar means Allah is the greatest, and Allahu Akbar is a question form. Is Allah the greatest? Point number 6 is that it needs to be after the timing of the prayer has entered. The evidence has preceded إذا حضرت الصلاة فليؤذنكم أحدكم وليؤم أكبركم, when the prayer enters. So the adhan can only be done after the timing enters. The exception to this rule is Salat al-Fajr, because there used to be, and there still is in many Muslim countries, 2 adhans. One adhan for Fajr is really to wake people up. This can be done about an hour or 45 minutes before the actual time. And then there is the second adhan, which is the adhan after the actual break of dawn, meaning as and when the Fajr sets in. At the time of Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam, Bilal radiallahu anhu used to give the adhan when it was still night time, and Ibn Maktoum, another one of his mu'adhin, used to give adhan when the actual Fajr would set in. Point number 7 is that the adhan needs to be given by one person, so they can't take it in turns. One person does half and the second person does the second half, so this would not be permissible. Point number 8 is that you need to say the words in the same order that it has been reported, because if you change the order, this would become a bid'ah. And point number 9 is al-muwalat. All these words of the adhan, they need to be said in a string of continuous chain. You cannot leave a big gap. An exception is made if you have no choice but to interfere in your adhan. So for example, if there's a blind man, he's walking into danger, you can tell him, stop blind man, you're about to walk over a cliff, or anything of that nature. Fundamental rule number 2, these are the sunan aspects of the adhan. The sunan aspects mean that these are recommended, but if you don't do them, your adhan is still correct. 10 of these. Number 1, that the mu'adhin needs to have a nice voice. Number 2, he needs to be trustworthy. Number 3, he needs to be knowledgeable about when the prayer time begins. Number 4, he needs to be in a state of purity. Number 5, he should be standing. Number 6, he needs to be on a high place. Number 7, he should have his head raised and his 2 fingers, one in each ear. Number 8, he needs to be facing the Qibla. And number 9, he needs to move his head right and then left when he's saying Hayya al-Salah and then Hayya al-Falah. And number 10, it should be done in the first instance of the prayer time entering. Okay, let us go through this. It doesn't require too much explanation. Number 1, a good voice, because Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam chose Bilal to give the adhan, because Bilal radiallahu anhu had a booming voice and he had a nice voice. Number 2, he has to be trustworthy. This means that he will always turn up and give the adhan, and he will not fail you and let you down. Number 3, he should be knowledgeable about when the prayer time begins, so that he does not come late or come too early and give the adhan too early. Number 4, because the adhan is a dhikr of Allah, and whenever you make dhikr of Allah, it is recommended that you should be in a state of wudu. Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam said, "Karihtu an adhkur Allah wa ana ala ghayri tahaara." I hate that I should mention Allah whilst I am not pure, meaning not in a state of wudu. Number 5, he should be standing because Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam told Bilal, Qum fa'adhin, stand up and give the adhan. And also when you stand up, this will make your voice reach a further distance. Number 6, he should stand on a high place because this will make the voice reach further. But of course nowadays we have loudspeakers, so there is no need to do this. Number 7, he should raise his head and put the right index in his right ear and the left index in his left ear, just as Bilal did so. Number 8, he should face the Qibla just as he does so in his Salah. Number 9, when he says Hayya al-Salah, he should turn his head to the right, and when he says Hayya al-Falah, he should turn his head to the left as Bilal did. Point number 10 is that it needs to be in the early time. So for example, if Salat al-Dhuhr is at 1 o'clock, then he should make the adhan at 1 o'clock and no later. This is due to the generality of the evidences. Rasulullah ﷺ said, Badiru bil a'mal, do not delay in doing good deeds. The exception here is Salat al-Fajr because it has 2 adhans. One is the early one, which is still in the night, and one is when actually the Fajr begins. This is to wake people up, and also if they want to do Qiyam al-Layl, nighttime prayer, then this would be an ideal chance to do so. The other thing different about the adhan of Salat al-Fajr is that when you finish saying Hayya al-Falah, you also say twice As-salatu khayrun min an-nawm, that the prayer is better than the sleep. You can say this either in the first adhan or the second adhan, but it is preferable that you say this in the first one, because this is the adhan that actually wakes people up. Let us put some revision questions. Question number 1, this is a multiple choice. A kafir comes up to you wanting to win the hearts and minds of the Muslims, and he says, I know I'm not a Muslim, but why don't you allow me to give the adhan for you? Because it will cement relations between the Muslim and non-Muslim community, and it will be a goodwill gesture. What do you say, A or B? Do you say A? Why, what a wonderful idea, we would be honored to have you give adhan for us. Or do you say B? If you want to win the hearts and minds of the Muslims, you must put your forehead on the floor in prostration to Allah, take Him as your Lord alone, and Muhammad ﷺ as your Prophet, and Deen al-Islam as your religion and way of life, and only then you will win the hearts and minds of the Muslims. Question number 2, what is the hukum, the ruling of adhan? And question number 3, make mention of all the sunan aspects of the adhan. These are the recommended aspects of the adhan. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We move on to the chapter of the conditions for your salah to be sahih, correct. There are 9 of these, so please note this down. Number 1, al-Islam. Number 2, al-Aql, which is intellect. Number 3, at-Tamyiz, the age of distinction. Number 4 is at-Tahaara, you need to be in a state of purity. Number 5, the time of the prayer must have entered. Number 6, covering your private parts. Number 7, making sure you have no impurity on your body, clothes, or the place of prayer. Number 8, facing the Qibla. And number 9, an-Niyyah, your intention. Okay, so let's go through these one by one. Number 1 is al-Islam, because if a kafir was to pray, it can never be accepted from him. We have mentioned evidences for this, but another one is the saying of Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran, وَمَا مَنَعَهُمْ أَن تُقْبَلَ مِنْهُمْ صَدَقَاتُهُمْ إِلَّا أَنَّهُمْ كَفَرُوا بِاللَّهِ وَبِرَسُولِهِ, that nothing prevented their charity from being accepted except that they disbelieved in Allah and the Messenger. So any good deeds they do cannot be accepted until they first believe in Allah as their one and only Lord, and Muhammad ﷺ as their Prophet. Number 2, he needs to have aql, because the pen is lifted from the madman, and also it is impossible for the madman to bring a niyyah, an intention to pray. Number 3, the age of at-Tamyiz. We said this is 7 years old, and at-Tamyiz is the age at which the child can distinguish an act of worship from any other act. Point number 4 is that you need to be in a state of purity. Now there are 2 types of impurity, the minor impurity and the major impurity. The minor impurity means that you just need to make wudu and then you'll be able to pray. Major impurity means that making wudu is not good enough, rather you have to take a bath and then you can pray. The hadith says, لا يقبل الله صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ. Allah does not accept the prayer of any one of you when he is in a state of impurity until he makes the wudu. So in this hadith, minor impurity is referred to. There are some times when a person cannot be in a state of purity through no fault of his own. Such cases are incontinence, for example, the continuous flow of urine, and he cannot control it. So in this case, he will pray as he is, even though he will be in a state of impurity. Likewise, the istihada, which we talked about, the continuous flow of blood, she will have to pray as she is. She will make wudu for every single salah, and likewise with the person with continuous flow of urine. Point number 5 is that the time of the prayer must have entered. This is because it's not permissible for you to pray before the time of prayer, except if you have a valid Sharia excuse. Like for example, if you're on a journey and you join the prayer, so one of the prayers you may be praying early. Allah Azza wa Jal says, Inna as-salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaban mawquta, that the prayers are fixed on their prescribed times for the believers. And also it is in the Sahih that Jibreel alayhi salam came down and led the Prophet alayhi salatu salam in prayer on 2 days. The first day he led him on the early time, and the second day he led him on the latest time. So what are these timings of the prayer? Let's go through the prayers one by one. We start with Salat al-Fajr. Now Salat al-Fajr is prayed at dawn. The thing is that there are two types of dawn, the false dawn and the true dawn. The Fajr is prayed at the true dawn. The false dawn is when the white light goes vertically up into the sky. The true dawn is when the white light spreads out horizontally over the horizon, and this is when the Fajr begins. Fajr time extends all the way up until sunrise, but it is sunnah to pray it at the earliest time possible. Salat al-Dhuhr begins when the sun declines from the zenith, and it extends all the way up till when the shadow or shade of an object is equal to its height or its length. This is when Salat al-Asr begins. The timing for Salat al-Asr is divided into 3 categories. Category number 1, this is al-Afdaliyah, the recommended time and the best time to pray Salat al-Asr, which is when the shadow of an object is equal to its length, all the way up until the shadow of an object being twice its length or height. Thereafter begins Waqt al-Jawaz, the time which is permitted for you to pray the Salat al-Asr. It begins when the shadow of an object is twice its length and extends up until when the sun turns yellow. Because when the sun is right up in the sky, it's not yellow, it's bright white. But as it descends, it reaches a point when it turns yellow. Thereafter begins Waqt al-Darura. You are not allowed to pray Asr at this time except if you are forced to do so. And this is the time from when the sun turns yellow all the way up until sunset. Salat al-Maghrib begins when the disk of the sun sinks underneath the horizon, and it continues up until the shafaq, which is the redness in the sky, disappears, because that's when night sets in. And Salat al-Isha begins when the night sets in, all the way up until Muntasaf al-Layl, half of the night, according to the correct opinion of the scholars. It does not extend all the way up until Salat al-Fajr, so take note. Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam said, Al-Isha ila nisf al-Layl al-Awsat, that Salat al-Isha is up until the middle of the night. Point number 6 is about covering your private parts. Ya bani Adama khudhu zinatakum inda kulli masjid. O children of Adam, take your adornments to every masjid. It means cover your private parts. The private part for the man is from the navel all the way to the knees. It does not include the navel, and neither does it include the knees. It does not include the back, but it does include the backside, the buttocks. Nevertheless, it is recommended for the man to cover the top part of his body, to cover his shoulders. This is because of the hadith, لا يصلي أحدكم في الثوب الواحد ليس على عاتقه منه شيء, that one of you should not pray in one garment, not covering anything of his shoulders. So this is a recommendation. But if he covers the private parts, then his salah is correct. What about the awra of the woman? If she is praying outside where non-mahram men can see her, then the correct opinion amongst the scholars is that the whole woman is awra. That includes the face and hands. If the woman follows the other scholarly opinion, which says you can uncover the face and hands, then that is her choice. If she is praying inside her home or in a place where non-mahram men cannot see her, then there's no problem in her uncovering the face and the hands. And from the scholars are those, they say that she can also uncover the feet. Ibn Qudama al-Maqdisi rahimahullah is of this opinion. So there is no problem if she uncovers the face, hands and feet. Point number 7 is that he needs to avoid impurities touching his body, clothes and place of prayer. This is because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Tanazzahu min al-bawl fa inna 'ammata 'adhab al-qabr min al-bawl." Keep away from urine because most of the punishment of the grave is because of the urine. Likewise, Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ, so purify your clothes, according to one tafsir. Also, the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran, وَعَهِدْنَا إِلَى إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ أَن طَهِّرَا بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْعَاكِفِينَ وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ. When we ordered Ibrahim and Ismail to purify my house for those making tawaf, for those making i'tikaf, for those making ruku' and for those making the sujood. So the place of prayer therefore needs to be pure. And there is also the evidence which we mentioned before, when the A'rabi, the desert Arab, came to the masjid and urinated. So the Prophet ﷺ ordered a bucket of water and he poured water over the urine, thus purifying the polluted place. And there is a question here. If you were to pray and you finish your prayer, then you realized that on your clothing there was a piece of impurity, but you didn't realize it before. What do? Do you repeat your prayer or you don't repeat your prayer? The answer is your prayer is correct and it does not need to be repeated. The evidence for this is when Rasulullah ﷺ was praying in his shoes and he was leading his companions. And in the middle of the prayer, he just takes off his shoes. So the companions thought that this is something that they need to do as well. So they took their shoes off as well. So after the prayer finished, they asked him about this. And Rasulullah ﷺ told them that Jibreel came down and told me that there was some impurity on my shoes. And this is why he took them off. But note here that he did not repeat those rak'at which he was praying with the impurity. It proves that if you were praying and there's some impurity on your clothes but you were not aware of it, then your prayer is correct. Otherwise the Prophet ﷺ would have repeated the whole prayer. Please also note here that to pray with your shoes on is sunnah. It is closer to the sunnah than to pray with your shoes off. Point number 8 is facing the Qibla. The evidence for this is the statement of Allah Jalla wa Ala, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ فَلَنُوَلِّيَنَّكَ قِبْلَةً تَرْضَاهَا فَوَلِّ وَجْهَكَ شَطْرَ الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ وَحَيْثُمَا كُنْتُمْ فَوَلُّوا وُجُوهَكُمْ شَطْرًا. Verily we have seen the turning of your face towards the heaven. Surely we shall turn you to a Qibla that shall please you. So turn your face in the direction of Al-Masjid Al-Haram, and wherever you people are, turn your faces in prayer in that direction. Is anyone excused from this rule? Yes, there are certain people who are excused from this rule, like for example an ill person who cannot turn himself to face the Qibla, then he can pray in whichever direction is easy for him. Likewise the khaif, the one who fears, like for example in a battle, you will pray your Salat al-Khawf, the fear prayer, in whichever direction if the fear is that great. Likewise, it has been reported that Rasulullah ﷺ would pray the supererogatory, the nawafil prayers, on a journey facing other than the Qibla. What he would do, he was on his donkey and he would face the Qibla and say Allahu Akbar and start his prayer. And then thereafter, wherever the donkey faces or turns to, he would be praying in that direction. And finally, point number 9 is an-niyah. your intention, and the evidence for that is إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّةِ, your actions are but by intention. You should note here that the niyyah, intention, is the place of the heart. So you should not be uttering out anything, because that is a bid'ah. So you should not be saying, I now face the Qibla, praying my 4 rak'ah to Allah, or anything of that nature. You must also note that part of your niyyah must be seeking closeness to Allah Azza wa Jal, because your niyyah would be deficient without it. Let's top this chapter off with some questions. Question number 1. Explain the timings of the 5 prayers in the day. Question number 2. What is the evidence that Salatul Isha is up until half of the night? Question number 3. What is the evidence that the place of prayer needs to be pure? We mentioned 1 ayah and 1 hadith. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We move on to the chapter of the rulings of the prayer. This is a big chapter, 7 fundamental principles. So let's begin with fundamental rule number 1. These are the conditions for the prayer to become wajib, to become obligatory upon you. And there are 5 of them. So please note. Number 1, al-Islam. Number 2, al-Aql. Number 3, al-Bulugh, which is reaching the age of puberty. And these last 2 are concerning the woman specifically. Number 4, she must not be menstruating. And number 5, she must not be in postnatal bleeding. Let's go through this. First of all, what is wajib? Wajib is that which the shari', the lawmaker, ordains for you by way of obligation. So you must do it. If you do not do it, you are liable for punishment. And if you do it, seeking the face of Allah Azza wa Jal, you are rewarded. There are also things which the lawmaker ordains for you by way of recommendation. So these are mustahab, recommended things, or things that are beloved to Allah. Point number 1, we said al-Islam. This is because nothing is obligatory on the kafir except, first of all, to accept Islam, accept Allah, and accept Muhammad ﷺ as the messenger. Although, having said that, the kafir will be punished in the hereafter for not praying. In fact, he will be punished for not obeying all the sharia, even though his deeds cannot be accepted from him until he converts to Islam. And this punishment is just a means of increasing his punishment in the hereafter. So he is punished for not becoming a Muslim, and then on top of that he is punished for not obeying the Sharia. When Rasulullah ﷺ sent Mu'adh bin Jabal to Yemen, he said, you are going to the land of a people of the book. So let the first thing you call them to, Shahadatu an la ilaha illallah wa Muhammadur Rasulullah. So this is the first thing that the kafir must do. Rasulullah ﷺ did not tell Mu'adh that you should order them to pray until after they accept the Shahada. Point number 2 is al-Aql, because the pen is lifted from the madman, and it is not possible for the madman to come out with a niyyah, which is essential for the prayer. Point number 3, al-Bulugh, which is puberty. That's because before the age of puberty, as we've discussed in the evidence, the pen is lifted from the little child until he reaches the age of puberty. The child reaches puberty when he grows pubic hair, or if he has wet dream, or if he reaches the age of 15 years old. And for the woman, if she has her menses or if she becomes pregnant. The parent or the guardian of the child must train the child to start praying at the age of 7. This is so he becomes used to it, and it's not so much of a shock to him when he reaches puberty. If the child prays before the age of puberty, is there any reward in that? Yes, and it goes to the parent. Number 4 is that the woman should not be in her menses, because when she's in her menses, prayer is not wajib upon her. The evidence for this is the statement of Rasulullah ﷺ saying to Fatima bin Jahsh, فَإِذَا أَقْبَلَتْ حَيْضَتُكْ فَدَعِي الصَّلَاةِ وَإِذَا أَدْبَرَتْ فَاغْسِلِي وَصَلِّي. When your menses come, then leave off the prayer, and when it goes, then take a bath and pray. Does she make up for any missed prayers? The answer is no. But if she missed out on any obligatory fasting, then she has to make up for those. And point number 5, she must not be in postnatal bleeding. Salama radiyallahu ta'ala anha reported that they would leave off the prayer for postnatal bleeding for 40 days. So the majority opinion is that this postnatal bleeding should be left off for 40 days. Anything after that is deemed to be istihada. If her postnatal bleeding stops before 40 days, then she should take a bath and start praying. So she is not allowed the full concession. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We move on to the second fundamental rule, which are the arkan of the salah, the essential pillars of the salah. The arkan of the salah are those acts which essentially make up the prayer. They are the essential ingredients or essential composition of the prayer, such that if you did not perform any one of these, you must go back and perform it, and your prayer will be incomplete and not correct. It is not enough for you to just do sajda as-sahu at the end, because that cannot make up for the loss in the arkan of the salah. There are 14 arkan of the salah, 14 essential pillars of the salah. Make a note of these and memorize. Here they are. Number 1, to stand up in the prayer. This is for the fard prayers, not the nawafil prayers. Number 2, to say the takbiratul ihram, which is the first takbir you make to start the prayer. Number 3, to recite al-Fatiha. Number 4, to go into ruku'. Number 5, to raise yourself up from the ruku'. Number 6, to stand up straight after having raised yourself up from the ruku'. Number 7, to go into sujood. Number 8, to raise yourself up from the sujood. Number 9, to sit in between the two sajdas that you make. Number 10, to have a tam'anina. Tam'anina means tranquility and calmness in all your prayer. Number 11 is to make the last tashahhud. At-tashahhud means when you say at-tahiyatu lillahi was-salawatu wat-tayyibatu up until the end of it. Number 12 is that you need to be sitting when you say the at-taslim, the two salams on the right shoulder and left shoulder. Number 13 is to say the taslim. And number 14, all the prayer needs to be done in its correct order. Let us go through these. Number 1 is that you need to be standing. This is as Allah Azza wa Jal says, وَحَافِظُوا عَلَى الصَّلَوَاتِ وَالصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ, and preserve or guard your prayers, especially the middle prayer, which here means the Salat al-Asr, and stand for Allah in obedience. And also Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, صَلِّ قَائِمًا فَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَقَاعِدًا وَإِن لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَى جَنْبٍ. He said this to one of his companions who had an illness. He said, pray standing. If you are not able to, then pray sitting. If you are not able to, then pray lying down on your side. As for the voluntary prayers, the nawafil prayers, it is possible for you to pray them sitting down. However, the hadith says that you will have nisfu ajril qa'im. You will have half of the reward of a standing person. Point number 2 is takbiratul ihram. This is the opening takbir you make to start your prayers. This is due to the hadith مفتاح الصلاة الطهور وتحريمها التكبير وتحليلها التسليم, that the key to the prayer is purity, because of course you can't pray without purity. Then the opening of the prayer, meaning what makes you in a haram state, is the takbir. It makes you in a haram state because now you're not allowed to speak or eat or engage with anybody. So that's the takbir, the opening takbir. وَتَحْلِيلُهَا التَّسْلِيم, and what makes it halal is the taslim, the two salams on the shoulder, because after you say the two salams, now you are able to eat, speak with others, and you're free to do everything else which you were restricted in during your prayers. Point number 3 is that Surah Al-Fatiha must be recited, and your prayer is not valid without it. This is due to the statement لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب. There is no prayer for the one who did not recite the Fatiha of the Kitab, meaning the Surah Al-Fatiha. If somebody does not know Surah Al-Fatiha, it is wajib upon him to memorize it. But in the meantime, when he prays, he can make tasbihat. So he can say Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallahu, wallahu akbar. This is mentioned in the hadith where one person came to Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam and he told him that I'm not able to memorize anything of the Quran, so please advise me. And this is what Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam told him to say. Reciting Surah Al-Fatiha is a must, regardless whether you are praying alone, or you are the Imam, or you are being led by an Imam, regardless of whether this prayer is silent or aloud, according to the correct of the scholarly opinions. When you are being led in an aloud prayer by the Imam, then you can listen to the Imam when he recites Al-Fatiha, but afterwards you must recite it yourself. Or if it is possible, you can recite in between the Imam's recitation. So when the Imam says Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, if he pauses, then you can recite Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Then when the Imam says Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, if he pauses a little bit, then you can say Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. If this is not possible, you recite it after his recitation, even though he is reciting the surah. Point number 4 is making a ruku'. There is plenty of evidence for this. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu rka'u wasjudu. You believe, make a ruku' and prostrate. Likewise, the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was teaching the man who prayed incorrectly, he taught him how to pray properly. The hadith goes on a bit, but the relevant point from the hadith is when he told him ثُمَّ ارْكَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ رَاكِعًا. Then make your ruku' until you are at ease and in tranquility in your ruku'. The best way to make the ruku' is when you straighten out your back, but the least amount that you can do is to bend down so that your hands touch your knees. Point number 5 is to raise yourself from the ruku', and this is taken from the same hadith as mentioned. He goes, after mentioning the ruku', he told him ثُمَّ ارْفَعْ حَتَّى تَعْتَدِلَ قَائِمًا. Then raise yourself until you are standing up straight. Point number 6 is standing upright after you raise yourself, and we have just mentioned the evidence of this in the previous point. It is also narrated in the Sahih that Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, the famous companion, came to his people and said, I shall pray to you in the same way Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam used to pray with us. So the narrator of this narration said, I saw Anas do that which I do not see other people do. When he raised up from the ruku', he stood up so long that I thought he had forgotten to go into sajda. And when he raised himself from the sajda to sit in between the two sajdas, he sat for so long that I thought he had forgotten to go back into sajda. Subhanallah ya ikhwan. How many imams nowadays do we see do that? Rather, you see them as soon as they raise up from ruku', they're into sajda. And as soon as they raise themselves back up from sajda, they're into the second sajda. So this is one of the forgotten and deserted sunnahs. After you raise yourself from the ruku', there is also a dua that you can say. So after saying Sami Allahu liman hamida Rabbana wa lakal hamd, it is recommended for you to say Hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fih ملء السماوات وملء الأرض وما بينهما وملء ما شئت من شيء بعد أهل الثناء والمجد اللهم لا مانع لما أعطيت ولا معطي لما منعت ولا ينفع ذا الجد منك الجد. This is the dua that you should be able to find in any good dua book. It is worth memorizing and beautifying your salah therewith. Point number 7 is as-sujood. Again, there is plentiful evidence, but if we take the same hadith that we were talking about the man who performed the prayer badly, Rasulullah ﷺ told him, ثُمَّ اسْجُدْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ سَاجِدًا. Then prostrate until you are prostrating in tranquility and ease. Your sajda would be incomplete until you are touching 7 bones on the floor. What are they? Your 2 hands, your forehead, and included in that is your nose as well, your 2 knees, and your 2 feet, or the 2 balls of your feet. Point number 8 is that you need to raise yourself from the sajda. So this is the sitting in between the 2 sajdas. This is a rukn, as the Prophet ﷺ said, ثُمَّ ارْفَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ جَالِسًا. Then raise yourself until you are sitting in tranquility and ease. Point number 9 is the actual sitting itself between the sajdas, and we have just mentioned the evidence for that. Point number 10 is at-tam'anina, which is tranquility and ease. You need to be tranquil in all your prayer. If you make hasty movements or your prayer is done in a hasty fashion, then you need to repeat it. The evidence that at-tam'anina is one of the rukn of the salah is the hadith of the man who prayed badly. He came to the masjid and he prayed. Then he came to Rasulullah ﷺ and he gave salam to him. And the Rasulullah ﷺ told him, Salli fa innaka lam tusalli. He said to him, go and pray because you have not prayed, despite the fact that this man had prayed. So why did Rasulullah ﷺ order him to pray? It's because he was not praying with tam'anina, with tranquility. Rather, he hastily prayed. So Rasulullah ﷺ did not consider his prayer valid. It proves that at-tam'anina is from the rukn of the salah. Point number 11 is to say the last at-tashahhud. Now, if you're praying a 4 rak'ah prayer, then you are going to say at-tashahhud twice. The first one is going to be after 2 rak'ah, and the second one is going to be after the 4th rak'ah. Out of these 2, only one of them is the rukn, and the rukn is the last tashahhud. In the Sahih, Rasulullah ﷺ said, إِذَا قَعَدَ أَحَدُكُمْ فِي الصَّلَاةِ. When one of you sits in the prayer, فَلْيَقُلْ. Then let him say, التحيات لله والصلوات والطيبات. السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. This is at-tashahhud. Rukn number 12 is that you need to sit for this at-tashahhud, and you also need to be sitting for the 2 taslims that you make. The evidence has preceded where Rasulullah ﷺ said, ثُمَّ ارْفَعْ حَتَّى تَطْمَئِنَّ جَالِسًا. Then raise yourself, meaning from the sujood, until you are sitting in tam'anina, in tranquility. It is also reported in the Sahih that the companions, when they used to finish their prayer, they didn't used to say the taslim as we say it. Rather, what they used to do is they used to point with their hands to the right and to the left. This annoyed Rasulullah ﷺ, and he told them, عَلَى مَا تُومِئُونَ بِأَيْدِيكُمْ كَأَنَّهَا أَذْنَابُ خَيْلٍ شَمْسٍ. Why are you pointing with your hands as if they are tails of horses, meaning tails of horses which swing around from left to right. إنما يكفي أحدكم أن يضع يديه على فخذيه ويسلم على اليمين وعلى الشمال. It would be enough for one of you to put his 2 hands on his 2 thighs and say the salam on the right and on the left. Point number 13 is to say the salam, one on the right and one on the left, and the evidence for this has just preceded in the previous point. So just to clarify the difference, point number 12 was the actual sitting for the tashahhud and the taslim, and point number 13 is the actual taslim itself. So it would not be permissible for you to say the tashahhud or the taslim in a standing position. The last rukn, rukn number 14, is that the prayer needs to be done with tartib, and a tartib means the correct order needs to be respected. This is because acts of worship needs to be done in exactly the same way as the Prophet did it. If you deliberately change the order of the prayer, then your prayer is batila, it is null and void, and you must repeat it correctly. Okay, it is not the end of the chapter, however, we'll throw in some review questions. Question number 1. Why is being a Muslim one of the conditions for the prayer to become wajib on you? Please mention the evidence. Number 2, is it permissible for a menstruating woman or one in postnatal bleeding to pray? Mention the evidence. Question number 3, what do we mean when we say the rukn of Salah? Question number 4, if you did not perform any one of the rukn of the Salah, what would be the ruling of the Salah that you have prayed? Question number 5, mention the 14 arkan of the Salah and evidence for each one.